Hi everyone, this is Sharon from the Human Frequency, and I'm here to do a special report today, something I've never done before. This is my first transvestigation, and I'm going to be looking at an artist that I very much have admired through the years. I'm a big fan of this artist. She is the extremely talented singer and performer Siouxsie Sioux. And the reason I'm doing this is because I noticed that what we're told is alternative is often not really. And this is the case in independent media. A lot of the independent media is putting out the same fear, for example, as the mainstream media. But we're told this is the alternative view. And also in music, there's a lot of alternative music. And I remember sometime back in the 90s when people started to say, well, K-rock is not really alternative anymore. We started to notice that what was being called alternative music wasn't really. This all kind of happened around the era of Nirvana when they broke through. And we believed that Nirvana was a band from the clubs that broke through to the mainstream. I'll be exploring that in another special report in the future. I'm going to be doing a few of these reports on music because I am a musician. Music was a huge part of my life. I respectfully retired at the age of 37 from live music, which I think is a very respectable age to quit doing that. I think when people keep doing it into their 40s, it becomes kind of a little pathetic. Okay, but if you're making money at it and you're really enjoying it and it's going well for you, by all means, more power to you. But a lot of us in rock music particularly, we're best to bow out in our 30s. Anyway, I'm going to be looking at a singer, Siouxsie Sioux. And something that prompted me to do this, besides the alternative deception, which is something I will be getting way more into, as far as the alternative music and the arts, is the fact that people are really looking into the mainstream pretty deeply now. There's transvestigations on many, many celebrities in movies, TV, and in music. And it's pretty clear that across the board, most of these celebrities are transgendered. What's the reason for this? Why are there all these celebrities that we're looking at and admiring who are not openly transgender but are hiding it? The thing is, if somebody is openly transgender, that is fine. And if someone's gay, that is fine. What I'm wondering more and more about is why are we being told one thing when it's the other way? For example, if Siouxsie, who I'm going to prove is a male, I have an airtight case here. If Siouxsie is portraying herself as a woman and not being openly transgender, well, I have to ask, why is she doing that? Why can't she just let us know that she's a transgender male? Another thing that prompted me to do this, besides the fact that the mainstream's been exposed pretty thoroughly, is that I also received a message after my first mention of a transgender on the show. And this email I got was very angry. It was because I had called out as a transgender a movie star that one of the listeners was a big fan of. And sorry to have to burst your bubble, but the fact is we got to look very, very critically at what the media is showing us. Because this star that I mentioned was definitely a transgender, no question about it. And the message was angry, so here's what I'm doing. I'm going to look at somebody that I loved, and I still think is extremely talented, but this person has deceived me, and for a very, very long time. And I still think that Siouxsie and the Banshees is one of the greatest bands of all time, and Siouxsie is one of the greatest performers of all time. So back in the 80s, when Siouxsie was in her heyday, I was a child, so I was listening to other transgenders, such as Madonna, Prince, and Michael Jackson. And I got into Siouxsie and the Banshees in the 90s as I was getting more into alternative culture as a teenager and in my early 20s. And I actually saw her perform in 1999 after Siouxsie and the Banshees had broken up, but she was playing with the drummer who was also her husband, Budgie, in a band called The Creatures. And I saw them playing in 1999 at the House of Blues in Los Angeles. And I was amazed at how this lady in her early 40s was so amazing on stage. She was so vibrant. She was jumping around. She was such a performer. Well, she really held it together. A lot of the male to female transgenders really hold it together better than the females. So let's talk a little bit about the history of Siouxsie. And I thought she was also extremely beautiful. I still look at her as just having impeccable style. What beautiful hair, makeup, and clothing. Siouxsie was born as Susan Janet Ballion in 1957. So she's 60 years old now. And she started the band Siouxsie and the Banshees in 1976. Interestingly, Sid Vicious was their first drummer. Sid Vicious of the Sex Pistols, for those of you who don't know. And her future husband, Budgie, joined the band in 1979. Siouxsie is the queen of punk and goth. And back in that era, in the 90s, when I was listening to them a lot, and through the early 2000s, I had that kind of a look. It was, in the 90s, I was really into the goth look and the punk look, and I kind of crossed over a little bit. I was much more into that stuff back then, and now, I just look like everybody else right now, because once you're older, it looks a little ridiculous to keep doing those looks. And it makes you look old, by the way. So Siouxsie and the Banshees lasted from 1976 to 1996, and the Creatures, her side project with Budgie, went from 1981 to 2005. And in 1991, Siouxsie married Budgie, and they divorced in 2007. And when Siouxsie and Budgie divorced, she said, "I've never particularly said I'm hetero or I'm a lesbian. I know there are people who are definitely one way, but not really me. I suppose if I'm attracted to men, then they usually have more feminine qualities." I thought that was a very interesting thing to say, considering that when I started looking at photos of Siouxsie, with in mind that I might find that she was a man, just checking to see, I found that she was. So here are some of the traits where you can really see. This is a picture of Siouxsie taken around 2008. So at this point, she was already an older lady in her early 50s. And you can see she has an incredibly square jaw. The square jaw is a masculine trait. And here's a picture of Siouxsie as a young lady in the 70s. And it may be early 80s, but I think late 70s. I love this picture, actually. I think she looks very stylish, but she is a male. And she's got a lot of the traits that I find attractive in males, which is probably why I thought, for a woman, she's very attractive. That's part of the gender confusion that happens as you start to look at your same sex. If you're heterosexual and you start to look at your same sex and wonder why you find these traits attractive, well, it may be because they're male traits. She's got a very hard jawline. That's one of the major things to look for. And you could see her waist is absolutely tiny, enviable. I wish I looked like this in jeans, but I can't look like this in jeans because I'm a woman and women have bigger hips. And women have more body fat. She's got the tiny, skinny figure that I find very attractive in males. I love tiny, skinny guys. I love males that are really thin, like Gabriel. He's very thin. So I'm looking at this picture and I see the square jaw. I see the tiny waistline, the straight body. And with the hands, you can almost see the finger ratio, but not quite. So I've got some pictures of that later. Now, here's a picture of Siouxsie. This was an interview in 1983, and she's sitting in a very male sort of a way. She's got her legs spread out. She's kind of slumped over, and she was very much like an adolescent in this interview, even though she's 26 at the time. And I found it kind of amusing. She was really giving the interviewer a hard time. She behaved like kind of a spoiled teenage boy, and that kind of makes sense when you realize that she is a male, but she is sitting in a very male way here. That's not a very feminine way to sit. And Siouxsie is always covering up the neck. I'm going to show you lots of pictures of that. And the makeup, too, it's very heavy on the eye makeup, very heavy on the eyebrows. And this is done to mask that male brow ridge that she has. Siouxsie is always covering up her neck in photos. I noticed this over and over and over again because I was looking to see if I could find an Adam's apple. And I went through many, many photos. She covers the neck with her hands. Again, with her hands. Again, she's got her hand in front of it. She's also got a collar on that covers it up. This is a major way that she hides her neck, and I see it over and over again. Here she's really deliberately hiding the neck. She's drawing the collar in front of it to hide it. Now she screwed up. She's showing her neck. You can see clearly there's an Adam's apple there. And when we zoom in a little closer here, there it is. So she forgot to cover it up there. We really tend to overlook these things. in the photos. I mean, we're fans of these people. We just look at the glamorous pictures. I mean, she looks gorgeous in every picture, but she is a male. Here she's using a collar to cover up her neck. She's with her future husband, Budgie, who also is a little bit suspicious to me. I'm going to have to look into him. She mentioned liking males with feminine traits. So I'm going to be having to look into him a little bit more and see what's going on there. But he is a little female looking, but I'm not working on him right now. But see, she's got the collar again. You can see the hard jawline, the big shoulders too. Now here she's got a collar again. This is so typical. She does this all the time. And here's an older Siouxsie, probably in her 50s. She's got the collar on again, covering it up, although I think she may have had some work done on the neck because sometimes in later pictures, she doesn't cover it up. She's got a scarf. That's another thing she does a lot. She wears a scarf in a lot of her photos. And again, she's got a necktie on covering it up here. And the necktie being kind of a male fashion symbol, although back in the 90s, I used to wear a tie too. And the whole androgynous thing was really big starting around then in the mid 90s. And I mean, it was actually big before then, but I was too young to know about it or to understand it. But I think it was kind of off-putting to my parents and my grandmother when I'd watch the music videos because they didn't understand these kind of androgynous figures that I was watching. So it's been going on a long time. I kind of caught on to it in the 90s. It was really big. I actually looked kind of androgynous then too because I had really short hair and I had a kind of a punk look. And yeah, that was just, I remember one point I was walking on campus and there was a bunch of kids visiting UCLA where I was an art student. And I had bright orange hair at the time and a bob haircut, very tight bob, shaved up on the neck. And someone said, one of the kids said to another kid, "Look at his hair." And the other child said, "Her." So I guess the androgyny was pretty big back then. And, you know, feel free to transvestigate me. I've actually started transvestigating myself because I have very big shoulders for a lady, but still I don't have the male ratio. And here's another thing Siouxsie does that I think is interesting. How many rock stars wear turtlenecks? That's kind of odd. And I've seen some pictures of her in turtlenecks. And even later on, as an older lady, there she is with a turtleneck, covering up the neck, covering up the Adam's apple. All right, let's look at Siouxsie's body and why she's got that straight male body. Take a look at this picture of her. This is a really old one, taken probably in the 70s when she's very young. She's completely straight. Her body is completely straight. She doesn't have the female curve to the back. And look, she's standing in front of the unisex toilet sign, and it's pointing right at her. Curious. Here she is with her lover, Budgie, future husband, and again, straight back. She absolutely has no female traits when you look into it. That's how I'm able to deduce that she is transgender, because if somebody has maybe one of these traits, I would say, like me, I have pretty big shoulders and muscular arms, but everything else fits the female ratios. And even my shoulders, when I kind of measured them, they're slightly smaller than the male shoulders. And the male shoulders, you can fit 3 head widths across. And the female, it wouldn't be quite that much. And me, it's pretty close. So yeah, feel free to transvestigate me. But I've got a very soft jaw. I've got the straight forehead. And my hands have the female ratio where the index finger and the ring finger are the same length. We all try to forget this part of Siouxsie's career. This is when she was wearing the swastika armband back in the 70s. This is not something we want to think about because it's really, really racist. So I don't know how she got away with this and had a career afterwards, but I like to pretend it never happened, at least when I was listening to their music a lot, which I don't know if I will again or what, but I'm still a big fan. Still love the music. It's great, but it's really strange to think about these messages being put out. Here she's got a pretty straight body. She's got tiny, tiny breasts that she's showing. Pretty flat-chested. I think she may have taken some hormones. Looks like no implants or anything like that, but she did do something to get them to, you know, get a little bit fuller than male breasts. But she's a teenager there. And here's another super young picture of Siouxsie at the beach. And here you can really see she's got a completely straight body, straight up and down. There's no female curves here at all. She's got no breasts. That's okay. Some women have small breasts. But when you put it all together, you're going to see the picture, the whole picture. She's straight up and down here. Later in her career, this is the Kiss Them For Me single. This is in 1991, and she's got a completely straight back here too. There's no female curve at all. It's a beautiful picture. She looks very glamorous, but there is no femininity to it when you look beneath the makeup and the clothes and the style. And I managed to find one picture here where she's completely muscular and male looking completely. It's because of the lighting you can really see the male arms. This is a man's body. If you ignore the face and hair with the makeup and the hairstyle that's female, and you only saw the body, you would immediately know this was a male. So here's where I did the head to shoulders ratio. I took a ruler to it, and on my computer screen, the head measured 1 inch across, and the shoulders also measured 1 inch across. So it's completely even. And here too, I was able to measure the head to shoulders ratio, and she's a pretty small person. I mean, she's a small man, a small, skinny little man. So she still has sort of those more frail female traits, but when you measure it up, you can see this is a male proportion, head to shoulders. Siouxsie does this thing where she slumps her shoulders forward in a lot of pictures, and that's to kind of hide how wide they are. And she also has really big hair, which makes her head look wider, so the head to shoulders ratio looks more feminine. Here she is completely slumped forward, and you could see that those are big male shoulders. And you can also see the jawline here. Again, she's slumping the shoulders forward. This is a typical thing she does. Now let's take a look at the skull. The male skull has a more sloping forehead, and the female skull has a much more vertical, straight forehead. So let's take a look at Siouxsie's skull. Here you can see it's not totally damning in this picture. I mean, she does have a sloping skull. You could say this still looks like it could be a female, but I see it, and here you really see it. Where she's with Budgie, you can really see this is a male-shaped skull. You've got the hard jaw, and you've got the sloping back forehead. And I'd like to take a look at her hands now. This is when I really put it together, because when you put all these traits together at once, then you know. Now with the hands, I've heard that 3% of females have that male ratio where the index finger is a little shorter than the ring finger, so it can happen. But she's got all those other male traits too. I got a picture of Siouxsie's hand here. Incidentally, this is kind of interesting. She's in this picture, she's next to the winner of RuPaul's Drag Race. This drag queen is named Sasha Velour, and Sasha Velour won the show by doing Siouxsie's look. So I thought that was interesting that a drag queen did the look and won the show with it. And in this picture, you can also see that Siouxsie's ring finger is longer than the index finger. As she gets older, it really starts to show more. This picture was taken in 2008. She's got an extremely male jaw. And I think as they age, the transgenders really start to fall apart a little bit. She's held it together pretty well, but it's starting to really show now. She's 60 now, and these pictures are from when she was in her 50s, some of the older ones. Here's an older picture of her and Budgie before they were married, and they did this kind of sexual scene. I mean, I think they were having sex in the shower. This is from the Creatures album, and I know this is to kind of sexualize her and you know, make it look like she's having a really good time with Budgie, who may be a transgender too. And I don't even know if they were really a genuine couple or not, because a lot of the people in media, their whole lives are acting. So we don't know if the relationships are even genuine. She and Budgie seem to be pretty close for a long time. Here she is with Budgie in the old days. Again, he looks pretty female here. I have to look into that a little more. They were together for, like I said, from 1991 through 2007. They were married, but they were together before then as a couple, if they were indeed a real couple. See, as they get older, here's a much older picture of Siouxsie and Budgie. It really starts to fall apart a little bit. I mean, this is a very odd look for Siouxsie, but What can you do when you're in your 50s? And I found this interview, which was also somewhere in the mid 2000s, and this really looks to me like a man. It looks like a man with makeup on, and yeah, everything's shaved, everything's clean, but this is a very, very male look here. So we really have to pay attention to what alternative media is showing us, because we think that if it's not in the top 40, that it's alternative. And I think this is a big trap, because when I was a teenager and in my 20s, and it took a long time before I even started to figure it out that the alternative wasn't really alternative, I wasn't buying the mainstream stuff. I wasn't buying the top 40. I wanted something different, more artistic, and I went for it. And what I was going for was actually being put out by the same labels as the mainstream stuff. Now, it was much more artistic. It was much better music. Bands like Siouxsie and the Banshees and Sonic Youth, who also is a transgender band that I'm going to be looking into a little bit on another series, another part of this series. And Nirvana also very, very, looking very transgender. The whole Kurt and Courtney thing, I saw a video about them, and they definitely look like they have a role reversal going on there. So I was looking at a lot of transgenders, which was also promoted very big. The whole gay indie scene was promoted really big. And when I lived up in Portland, especially up in the Northwest, it was a huge part of the music scene to be androgynous. So this was going on even through the mid 2000s and even to this day. But nowadays, people are starting to notice that a lot of the people in the media are transgendered and weren't telling us. So it's just food for thought, something to look into. I'm willing to debunk my own life. I'm willing to look at stuff that I'm a fan of, and I'm willing to say, well, I was fooled too. And so please don't be angry with me for pointing out the truth, because that's just the way it is. I want to thank you for listening, and I'll have more of these reports coming up. I'm going to be looking more into music and art, because as a music and artist that's been greatly deceived, I think it's time to finally talk about it. Thanks for listening. See you again real soon.